This may be the fastest way for Moscow to lose its claim to superpower status. At 1200 hours in the Strait of Hormuz, a harsh electronic shriek rips through the silence as the Russian frigate Stoiky pushes into a reckless game of nerve, closing to within 1,500 feet of the $13 billion USS Gerald R. Ford. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, every screen flashes warning red. Radar is being jammed. GPS signals have dropped into a full cyber blackout. Around the strike group, 50 Iranian fast attack boats spread across the water like a storm cloud. If this carrier collides with Russian steel, the global energy market could spiral before the first rescue call is even made. This is the kind of moment that sits at the edge of a wider global crisis, and the twist about to unfold changes the entire picture. In the Strait of Hormuz, the most dangerous part of the story is still beneath the surface. By early 2026, a desperate partnership between Moscow and Tehran has turned the Persian Gulf into a geopolitical pressure point. Moscow wants a second theater to distract from Ukraine, while Tehran is using geography as leverage to push back against sanctions. They are not simply patrolling these waters, they are trying to create an unofficial toll gate at one of the most important maritime choke points on Earth. Think of the strait as the narrow front door to the world's richest neighborhood, with roughly 20% of global oil moving through it every day. Russia and Iran believe they can pressure that doorway shut and force the West into concessions. It is gray zone warfare at its sharpest, using individual platforms like the frigate Stoiky to cover what amounts to $1 billion power play. At 12:15 hours, the world's most vital shipping lane turns into a high-speed contest of nerve. The Stoiky suddenly banks and charges to within 1,500 feet of the USS Gerald R. Ford. At the same moment, its bridge activates powerful radar jammers, filling the air with a wall of electromagnetic static. It is a direct, brute force move. Moscow believes that by getting this close and blinding the Ford's Aegis-linked awareness, it can force the 100,000-ton American carrier to back off. Picture it like a reckless biker swerving inches from a school bus while blasting a tactical light straight into the driver's eyes. Only this time, the U.S. Navy does not flinch. The Ford immediately shifts into MCON Alpha. In one coordinated motion, the carrier shuts down every radio, every radar emission, every digital signature. The most advanced supercarrier in the world disappears from the electromagnetic spectrum, turning into a ghost. While the Russian crew assumes the carrier has been blinded, the U.S. Navy is already working from another layer of the fight. The Ford does not need active radar to understand what is happening. Its crew switches to high-definition infrared and thermal systems, tracking the heat pattern of Stoiky's engine room and the movement of personnel on its bridge with remarkable clarity. Moscow brought a loud electronic hammer to a fight that now belongs to passive sensors and silent observation. They see blank screens and think they have the advantage. They do not realize they are being studied in detail. At 12:30 hours, while Stoiky plays its electronic shell game with the Ford, Tehran opens the next phase. From limestone inlets along the coast, 50 IRGC Zulfiqar fast attack craft burst onto the water at nearly 70 knots. But they do not race directly at the American fleet. Instead, in a calculated display of asymmetric pressure, they weave through a line of 300,000-ton civilian supertankers. Tehran is using the global energy supply itself as a shield. They know the U.S. Navy's rules of engagement are built on discipline. Any heavy strike against that swarm risks a catastrophic oil spill, a regional environmental disaster, and a market shock that would hit the entire world. It is like releasing a swarm into a room full of fuel vapor. The giant still has strength, but every move has consequences. High above, at 35,000 feet, Moscow adds another layer. A Tu-95 Bear bomber circles the area, its long-range cruise missiles already powered and fed with targeting data. The Kremlin is not trying to stay hidden. It wants to be seen. The bomber's radar profile is meant to drag American attention upward. This is the vertical squeeze. If the U.S. Navy focuses on the aircraft overhead, the swarm below can press closer to the tankers. If it concentrates on the boats, the bomber gains freedom to simulate a long-range strike profile. Moscow and Tehran believe they have finally created a perfect dilemma, one that can split American attention and break the system of systems advantage. But as that Russian pilot prepares for the next move, he has no idea he is already being watched by sensors that do not need radar to track him. At 1300 hours, the world's most important waterway goes digitally dark. Moscow and Tehran launch a full GPS spoofing operation. This is not routine interference. It is a carefully designed attempt to feed false positioning data into the American navigation picture. On tactical displays, the strike group appears aligned and stable. In reality, ships are being nudged by a digital illusion toward a dangerous approach with a 300,000-ton supertanker. Inside the Combat Information Center of an Arleigh Burke destroyer, the picture becomes chaos. The screens show clear water, but the lookouts on the bridge are shouting that a massive wall of steel has emerged through the haze less than 200 yards away. Collision alarms erupt. Sailors have seconds to avoid an ecological and economic crisis. From Moscow's perspective, this is a gray zone masterstroke. If an American warship causes an accident, the narrative could be turned instantly. The U.S. Navy would be painted as reckless, and the Gulf would ignite politically even without a missile being launched. But the U.S. Navy does not rely on one layer of navigation. While the GPS feed is lying, American crews strip the false data out of the system and shift to inertial navigation. Using ring laser gyroscopes and gravity-referenced motion tracking, the ships navigate by physics itself. No jamming signal can rewrite mass, motion, or the rotation of the planet. The destroyer throws into a violent emergency turn, engines roaring, and misses the tanker by just 50 feet. Moscow brought a digital illusion into a contest governed by mechanics and discipline. The fleet does not stumble. It adapts. At 13:30 hours, as the American formation stabilizes, Moscow shifts to its fallback plan, the Shadow Link. Realizing the spoofing attack has failed, Russian coordinators move the 50 Iranian boats off satellite-dependent communications and onto a low-tech mesh network. Signals bounce through the coastal terrain on low-frequency analog transmissions, buried under the clutter of civilian broadcasts and maritime chatter. Moscow believes it has found the one band the U.S. Navy will hesitate to disrupt. But the American answer is not hesitation. It is spectral dominance. Two EA-18G Growlers arrive from the USS Abraham Lincoln and immediately begin cognitive electronic warfare. They do not simply flood the airwaves with noise. Their jamming suite isolates the exact pattern of the Russian-Iranian mesh network and surgically removes it from the battle space. Think of the most advanced noise-canceling headphones in the world, except instead of silencing engine hum, they erase the enemy's command link. Iranian commanders are speaking into their radios, but their boat crews hear only dead air. Within 90 seconds, the Shadow Link collapses. The swarm, once coordinated like a single organism, starts to fragment. Boats at high speed begin drifting out of formation, narrowly avoiding each other as their shared guidance disappears. By 1400 hours, the Strait of Hormuz is at the brink of open conflict. Washington raises the alert level, and a final warning goes out across open frequencies. Disengage now or face overwhelming consequences. Tehran and Moscow assume the United States is bluffing. They believe an aircraft carrier is too valuable to risk in such a narrow choke point. They think they have cornered the giant. What they do not realize is that the giant has already been standing in their blind spot. Then the sea itself changes. Midway between the Iranian coast and the USS Gerald R. Ford, the water begins to churn. A 560-foot black hull rises through the surface, throwing off waves and spray. It is the USS Michigan, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine. These submarines are built to remain unseen. Their power lies in invisibility. But today, visibility is the point. By surfacing in the middle of the most dangerous maritime bottleneck on Earth, the U.S. Navy sends a message no one can misunderstand. The Michigan is not simply another warship. It is a floating arsenal, carrying 154 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles, each one capable of being assigned against fortified targets and hardened command infrastructure. While Tehran's fast boats are still reeling from the Growler's electronic disruption, they now find themselves staring at a submarine that appeared exactly where they least expected it. This is the moment of realization. While they were trying to jam the sky and confuse the surface picture, a silent predator had already moved into position below them. The hunters suddenly understand they are the ones under pressure. At 14:30 hours, the tension finally breaks, not with missile trails or burning wreckage, but with silence. Every layer of the Russian-Iranian operation has been methodically unraveled. The jamming, the spoofing, the mesh network, the bomber pressure from above. One by one, the pieces have been neutralized by American integration across sensors, navigation, aviation, and undersea warfare. On the International Guard frequency, a shaken Russian voice announces the successful completion of planned regional exercises. It is a diplomatic cover story, an attempt to hide a failed coercion play behind formal language. But the outcome is already obvious. The frigate Stoichi turns away. The remaining Iranian boats follow, pulling back toward port. The U.S. Navy does not pursue. It does not need visible destruction to prove control of the battle space. The deeper victory lies elsewhere. During those 180 minutes, Ford and the wider force collected a vast amount of intelligence. Sensor suites captured frequency hopping patterns, jammer behavior, communication rhythms, and the mechanical signatures of coastal vessels across the Russian-Iranian network. The standoff may read like a cinematic crisis, but the principle at its center is very real. Modern naval power is not just about firepower. It is about data, integration, and the ability to see clearly when the opponent is trying to blind you. That is the true lesson of 21st century warfare. The US Navy does not simply train against targets. It trains across networks, systems, and information layers. And that invisible architecture is often what keeps shipping lanes open, markets stable, and adversaries from turning pressure into lasting advantage.